Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
Today we're doing a deep dive into the material suggested by, well, the title, author, and publisher of Mitch Albom's really powerful work, Tuesdays with Morrie.
And we should say up front, our source material is structurally, a bit minimal.
It is. But the themes that the book universally suggests are just so strong. We're talking about mentorship, the relentless ticking of the clock, and really the essential structure of what a well-lived life even looks like.
It's a perfect entry point for a critical systems analysis.
Absolutely.
So the mission here really is to ask a fundamental and I think a very pressing question.
Which is?
How do our societal systems, the economic ones, our educational scripts, our whole culture, how do they actively incentivize us to prioritize professional success, making money, and frankly, just perpetual distraction?
Over the things that actually matter.
Exactly. Over deep human connection, over the kind of reflection we all need, and maybe most importantly, over preparing for our own mortality.
At its heart, this is really an exploration of how the modern system of value, of what we consider valuable, has tragically misaligned our concept of time well spent with what actually delivers true, sustainable personal fulfillment.
Right. We're conditioned by these structural incentives to value output, things you can measure, things you can monetize over just presence, the kind of presence that you can't put a price on.
And this topic isn't just relevant, it feels urgent.
Oh, completely. We're seeing this profound cultural shift, aren't we? It's like a crisis of meaning, really.
You see it everywhere. Widespread professional burnout, this collective anxiety that seems to be hanging over everything.
And this huge flight from traditional career paths. I mean,
Right.
whether you call it the Great Resignation or quiet quitting, or you look at the obsession with wellness and lifestyle changes, all these things point toward a deep and widespread dissatisfaction with the prevailing system of value. The system that tells you what a successful life is supposed to look like is, well, it's visibly failing the people inside of it.
Precisely. And the core premise of the book, this idea of a final weekly class on life taught by a dying professor, it speaks directly to a gap in our institutional architecture.
A gap? How so?
Well, think about it. If the systems we built to educate us and structure our lives were actually working, we wouldn't need a personal crisis or, this accidental reconnection between a student and a dying mentor, just to force us to think about life's basic meaning.
So we need to be clear about our focus today. This is really important.
Yes.
We are not here to moralize or to assign individual blame. We are strictly focused on mapping the structural incentives, the economic metrics, and the powerful cultural narratives that condition people. Like the protagonist in the story is sort of implied to be to chase external validation.
Chasing status until a deep personal crisis forces them to stop.
Right. To stop, look inward, and seek out a completely different value system. This is about identifying the structural oversight that leaves us perfectly prepared for working, but completely unprepared for living.
Okay, so let's start by establishing the context we have, which is, like you said, a little limited. And then we can extrapolate its systemic implications.
Right. So the source material. We have the book Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom, and it's published as an A-Knopf book.
And the author, Mitch Albom, even just by his name recognition, gives us a really crucial clue.
He was a sports journalist, right? A very successful one.
Extremely successful. And that's a career that is deeply entrenched in performance metrics, public spectacle, speed, and, well, the quantification of success.
Yeah.
A journalist in that world is operating in a hyper-competitive system.
Where value is measured by, scoop circulation numbers?
Scoops, numbers, celebrity access, and the absolute urgency of the deadline. It's a system built on speed.
That background gives us a really stark systemic contrast to what the book is about.
It's the perfect setup. Albom's eventual transition from that world to writing this reflective, emotionally resonant book, it embodies the very conflict the book is trying to address.
The pivot.
Exactly. The pivot from the fast, measured, transactional world of professional status to the slow, unmeasured, and profoundly human world of deep connection and introspection.
So his own life trajectory, his career shift, is basically evidence of the system's failure to satisfy on a deeper level.
It's a living testimony to it. And the title, Tuesdays with Morrie, is probably our most powerful piece of systems data here.
How so? Just the title.
Think about what it suggests. A formal, structured, recurrent mentorship. The focus is explicitly on life lessons. This structure, the planned, scheduled nature of it, is itself a profound systemic critique.
Because it's a response to a culture that just doesn't have that.
It utterly lacks it. There's no formal, non-academic, non-market-driven teaching on the essential human issues, on meaning, grief, love, death.
And why is the scheduled nature of it so important, the word Tuesdays?
The simple word Tuesdays. It's so mundane, but it contrasts so sharply with the existential nature of the lessons. Our institutionalized time, Monday through Friday, is almost universally dedicated to productivity.
To generating financial value.
To activities the economic system values.
Right.
So the fact that the most vital education in the protagonist's adult life had to be carved out on a set day, protected from the rest of the week's demands.
It highlights a massive institutional gap.
The huge one. We schedule the mundane, but we leave the profound entirely to chance.
That protected time, that Tuesday, becomes a deliberate structural boundary. It's like a temporal firewall.
A firewall built to shield the fragile work of introspection from the relentless systemic pressure of just doing.
And that's how you get to the central thesis.
Exactly. The central thesis, which we can infer from this structure, becomes crystal clear. The system we live in excels at teaching us one thing.
How to make a living.
It's fantastic at it. It provides robust mechanisms for financial literacy, career specialization, accumulating status. But institutionally, it systematically fails to teach us
how to live.
And what's fascinating here, connecting back to the initial context, is the role of the publisher, a Knopf book.
A major mainstream commercial publisher.
Right. And that creates a systemic paradox. The system of commercial publishing, which runs on profit and market success, is the necessary vehicle to distribute a book whose entire message is a potent critique of hyper-commercialism and market-driven values.
So even the counter systems have to use the infrastructure of the dominant system to get the message out.
The market is so comprehensive that it can commodify even the rejection of commodification. The critique, ironically, becomes a bestseller.
So the book's implied thesis is that this intentional, personalized mentorship, this counter system, is necessary because our major institutions,
like the corporate world, the financial market, the formalized education system, they've all adopted these materialist scripts that you have to consciously dismantle. Morrie's final class isn't just a mentorship.
It's a necessary anti-curriculum. Okay, let's drill down into the core insights suggested by this framework. Let's outline the 4 key areas where the book's lessons really critique these systemic failures.
And we should keep emphasizing the underlying mechanisms, not just the individual personalities.
Right. So the first critique, Insight 1, is about the economic engine's values, you've called it. The cult of consumption versus the power of connection.
Yes. We've already touched on this. In our system, success is measured by accumulation.
Title, salary, assets, the things you can list on a resume or a bank statement.
And the mechanisms of contemporary capitalism, specifically this pressure for constant rapid growth, they necessitate perpetual consumption. This drives the individual into a feedback loop.
A loop where you need more money for more things, which means you need to work more, which takes up more of your time.
The mechanism is a treadmill, and it's running at an ever-increasing speed. The system dictates that value is found externally in the market. So you have to constantly re-engage with it, defining your identity by your purchasing power or your professional status.
So the profound critique the book is delivering implicitly is that real, enduring fulfillment comes from things that are non-marketable, things you can't quantify.
Love, forgiveness, community, emotional transparency. These are things that don't have a price tag.
And here's where the system's failure becomes a real sociological cost, right? Because these elements, love, presence, forgiveness, they are impossible to put on a corporate balance sheet.
There's zero-sum metrics in economic terms. And if a system is only designed to reward and optimize what it can measure,
it systematically ignores and actively undermines anything it can't.
Which means the sociological cost of, say, emotional poverty, broken communities, the mental health decline we see everywhere, those are the outcomes of prioritizing the measurables. And they're externalized.
The economic system doesn't pay for the consequences of the alienation it creates.
No. Individuals, families, and public health systems absorb that cost. So the pursuit of financial wealth seems inherently more rational within the system's logic than the pursuit of connection.
Even when that connection is the true source of happiness.
The system has absolutely no financial incentive to correct that deep misalignment.
Okay, so if we agree that accumulation drives the system, that brings us right to Insight 2. Time as a commodity versus time as presence.
It's the next logical step. The system doesn't just measure wealth. It rigorously measures and commodifies the means of creating that wealth, which is our finite time.
You see it in institutional operations everywhere. Corporate calendars scheduled in 15-minute increments.
Billable hours, performance reviews tied to output per hour, the cultural expectation of immediate email responses.
All of this conditions us to treat time not as a space for living, but as a scarce, monetized resource to be spent productively.
Time becomes a debt that you owe to the corporate structure.
And the moment you internalize that idea, the idea of measuring time in units of economic output, like my hourly rate is X, you automatically devalue any time that can't be assigned a price tag.
Right. Sitting silently with a partner or spending an afternoon just thinking suddenly gets categorized as unproductive.
Wasting time. Or it's an indulgence that a busy, successful person just can't afford.
This system actively punishes non-monetized activity by slapping the label of inefficiency on it.
And this is why the structure of meeting only on Tuesdays is such a powerful, systemic counter-instruction.
It demonstrates the necessity of intentionally carving out sacred, protected time that is structurally immune to the demands of the corporate clock.
That protected day is a quiet, structural rebellion.
It's a rebellion against the calendar's tyranny. It's creating a firewall against the market, imperative to maximize every single minute for output. The medium, the scheduled day, is the message.
Okay, shifting focus a bit. Let's land on Insight 3, the systemic isolation of aging and mortality.
If the system is obsessed with growth and optimized for productivity, what happens when individuals inevitably face the end? Finitude, decline.
Well, the modern system, especially in the industrialized West, is institutionally designed to manage and hide aging and death.
It's optimized for convenience and denial. The elderly are often isolated geographically through specialized communities and socially through cultural marginalization.
This removes the processes of decline and dying from the shared communal experience.
Right. Death stops being a communal transition, and it becomes a private, clinical, and often shame-inducing failure.
And the mechanism to this is pretty straightforward, isn't it? It's efficiency and the worship of youth.
Exactly. Youth represents infinite potential, maximum productivity, high consumption. Aging and death represent finitude, decline, and non-productivity.
And because the dominant economic narrative relies on the assumption of infinite growth, anything that fundamentally contradicts that, like mortality, has to be pushed to the margins.
It's hidden away and managed by specialized subsystems, like the healthcare industry.
So Morrie's chosen approach, living openly with his dying, inviting conversation and vulnerability right into the process of his decline, is a devastating critique of this systemic denial.
He creates a counter-system, one centered on dignity, presence, and acceptance. The fact that we don't have ready-made societal scripts for good dying forces people into immense fear, making a private mentor like him necessary to provide the wisdom society failed to integrate.
Which brings us to the last point, Insight 4, which deals with the design of education itself, the failure of formal education in life skills.
Right. The protagonist, Mitch Albom, was a product of one of the best educational systems in the world. Yet he had to go back to his old professor years later because his expensive specialized education completely failed to give him the tools to navigate adult life.
The challenges of emotional complexity.
The institutional design of modern education prioritizes one thing above all else: market readiness. It's the corporate on-ramp.
And its incentive structure for students is crystal clear. Learn specialized technical skills.
Achieve high grades, secure the best job placement, maximize prestige. Students are relentlessly incentivized to learn for measurable external rewards for the job.
Not for deep, self-reflective wisdom or ethical grounding or emotional intelligence.
They're taught what to think inside their professional silo, but not how to feel, how to connect authentically, or how to build a value system that's independent of their annual salary.
It's a systems design flaw in the curriculum itself. We're training technicians, not human beings.
And that gap, that massive hole in the human operating manual, is precisely what Morrie's final class fills. It's an education that can't be graded, can't be credentialed, and is explicitly not designed for market entry.
It's designed purely for personal flourishing.
And for survival outside of that dominant professional system. The whole premise is that the skills you need to be successful in the financial system are often the exact inverse of the skills you need to be successful in life.
Okay, this brings us to a really crucial part of our analysis, explicitly mapping these systems. We need to identify the exact mechanisms and feedback loops that created the lost protagonist, this hyper-successful but internally hollow man.
And on the other side, the counter system that Morrie used to help him find his way back.
So let's identify the key actors again. On one side, we have the individual, the protagonist, and he's initially driven by these large anonymous forces.
Corporate structures, the financial market, and the immense pressure of the media and cultural apparatus, which is constantly broadcasting these narratives of success and scarcity.
And on the other side,
The mentor, Morrie. He represents the counter-system, one built on intimacy, reflection, non-transactional time, and the acceptance of finitude.
so let's examine the protagonist system first. The core incentive is what? Financial security, status.
Financial security, status recognition, and the fear of falling behind. And this, as we said, is what drives the alienation. It operates through a very powerful, positive, and corrosive feedback loop.
Okay, detail that corrosive loop for us.
The loop starts with an external reward. Success measured by salary, title, public visibility, like a prominent sports column. It brings a rush of external validation, a temporary sense of security.
But because the internal void, the lack of true connection, remains unaddressed, that satisfaction fades quickly.
It dissipates. And that forces the individual to seek the next level of success, the next promotion, the bigger house. This pursuit inevitably demands more time, more commitment.
And that leaves fewer resources, emotional and temporal, for your core relationships, for family, for friends.
So the result is professional success brings increased demands, which leads to less time for core relationships, which deepens the internal void and anxiety.
Which then drives the individual back towards seeking even more external validation in the form of higher success.
It's a self-perpetuating cycle of achievement, exhaustion, and alienation,
The tragedy of that loop is that the success causes the isolation.
which then requires the search for more success to numb the pain of that isolation.
Wait a second, I have to challenge this point, though. You're suggesting this financial security loop is purely alienating. But isn't there a genuine, foundational moral imperative to provide security for one's family?
That's a great question.
I mean, especially in a world where economic precarity is very, very real, how can we properly disentangle necessary responsibility from unnecessary alienation in that feedback loop?
That is a crucial distinction, and the systems analysis really helps us here. The moral imperative is to provide security. The systemic imperative, however, is to maximize status and accumulation far beyond what security actually requires.
Though the system blurs those lines.
It blurs them deliberately. It uses the language of responsibility to justify the pursuit of excess. Once an individual crosses the threshold from security to status competition, the loop becomes corrosive.
They're no longer working for provision.
No, they are working to satisfy the metric set by the system itself, a metric that is always moving higher.
That reframes the protagonist's journey completely. He wasn't rejecting responsibility. He was realizing he had become enslaved by the status metric, mistaking it for responsibility.
Precisely. Now compare that to Morrie's system. His incentive is intrinsic fulfillment, emotional wealth, and that's what drives connection.
So what's the feedback loop there?
It begins with openness and vulnerability. That openness leads to deeper, more authentic relationships.
And those deeper relationships provide, internal peace.
Internal peace, emotional stability, and self-acceptance. And this internal peace reinforces the confidence and the ability to be even more open and present.
So that loop is self-reinforcing internally. It's independent of market metrics or external status.
Completely. It generates wealth and social capital, not financial capital. And it requires nothing more than the willingness to be present.
The clash between these two loops is really rooted in the dominant cultural narratives that shape our decisions. The protagonist's loop thrives on maybe the most pernicious assumption in our culture. The "I'll be happy when" fallacy.
That narrative, yes.
Yeah.
The one that assumes life truly happens after achieving success.
After the mortgage is paid, after the promotion, after retirement.
It provides a systemic justification for deferring all the essential human activities, love, presence, reflection, to some undefined future point, by always prioritizing the immediate, quantifiable, market-demanded task.
The system ensures that the most important life lessons are never learned until it's too late.
And again, the title Tuesdays with Morrie directly challenges this. The profound lessons aren't embedded in some distant retirement fantasy.
They're in an ordinary present moment, a Tuesday.
The book argues that true life lessons have to be integrated into the here and now, not deferred until the system has finished extracting its output from you.
So finally, we have to ask, why does this systemic loop of career hyperfocus persist, even when the protagonist and countless people today realize it leads to personal suffering?
Because that entire loop of financial and status accumulation is continuously reinforced by the media and cultural apparatus.
Right. The media celebrates wealth, power, and spectacle, providing constant, high-status examples of the protagonist's path.
It elevates the pursuit of wealth to a moral good. And at the same time, it makes the high-effort, low-status choices, like taking time out for a meaningful, unpaid conversation every Tuesday, seem counterintuitive.
Or even self-indulgent within the system's framework.
And crucially, the system of valuing output over connection persists because it is highly efficient at generating economic capital. It's optimized for one purpose: profit maximization.
And because the cost of the harmful outcome, personal suffering, divorce, burnout, is not borne by the system.
It's externalized onto the individual and onto public health resources. The system has no financial incentive to change its core demands.
It's self-sustaining, and it's materially rewarding to its institutional shareholders, even if it produces widespread personal regret.
That's the system's acceptable byproduct.
Okay, with that mapping complete, let's bring these ideas squarely into the present day. How does the central conflict of Tuesdays with Morrie really manifest in our contemporary institutional structures and, our lived experiences?
We see the book's critique of materialism mirrored directly in the modern work environment and the resulting burnout crisis.
The systems still demand 204/7 availability. They quantify performance obsessively.
And they erode the boundaries that were once necessary for just basic human stability.
And what's deeply cynical is how the systems are now trying to co-opt Morrie's lessons.
That's a really important point.
We see corporations trying to integrate well-being into their structures. They recognize that burnout is an economic cost. It leads to attrition and expensive healthcare claims, both of which are measurable metrics.
But the solutions they offer are so superficial. Things like yoga classes, meditation apps, or mental health days.
They're trying to fix an individual problem. The individual is too stressed, without addressing the systemic demands that caused it.
The mandate for perpetual hyperproductivity.
It's the commodification of wellness.
It is a systemic failure dressed up as individual support. Morrie's lesson is about deep, structural boundary setting. It's about rejecting the cultural script entirely. The corporate version is just a Band-Aid.
A Band-Aid designed to make the individual resilient enough to withstand the fundamentally exploitative structure for a little bit longer.
They want you to use your Tuesday to feel better, so you can produce more on Wednesday.
And we absolutely have to talk about the technology and social media systems. I mean, if the protagonist was seeking external validation in the 90s through a newspaper column, today that process it's infinitely accelerated and intensified.
Oh, completely. The digital environment is an engineered system designed to monetize attention.
It structurally incentivizes performance, superficial connection, and these immediate feedback loops, likes, follower counts, manufactured success narratives.
It provides instant, measurable validation, which is exactly the psychological trap the protagonist fell into.
Think back to those feedback loops we mapped. Social media just amplifies the drive for external recognition.
And so, achieving the deep, slow burn, unmeasured wisdom of Tuesdays with Morrie becomes actively counter-systemic in a culture that's optimized for rapid, shallow validation.
The system conditions us to perform life for an external audience, not to authentically live it for internal reasons.
Beyond the corporate world, let's consider governance and cultural values. How do policies reinforce the narrative that Morrie challenges?
The prioritization of endless economic growth.
Government and corporate policies frequently reinforce that idea as the primary societal good. For instance, tax policies and subsidies often favor rapid innovation, high turnover, and youth employment. All metrics aligned with consumption and productivity.
And that leaves very little systemic space for the wisdom of age, or the value of non-productive contemplation, or the acceptance of finitude.
This cultural emphasis on perpetual youth and endless growth systematically marginalizes the entire life stage that Morrie occupies. There's little systemic reward for being a wise elder outside of very specific niche communities.
So the wisdom derived from mortality, the idea that lessons are gleaned from decline and death, is just excluded from public discourse because it challenges the core economic assumption that the system can perpetually expand.
And this neglect plays out so heavily in our everyday lived experience. I mean, the book's enduring relevance lies in this pattern we all see of substituting structured, externally imposed routines like work meetings or scrolling through feeds for structured, internal reflection.
We meticulously schedule our professional lives down to the minute, but we leave our emotional, ethical, and spiritual development entirely to chance or to crisis.
So the ultimate actionable takeaway for you, for the listener, is that these lessons provide a framework to intentionally schedule your own Tuesdays. It's about designing a personal, protected counter system to shield that crucial reflective time from external demands.
If you don't structurally schedule your wisdom, the dominant system will absolutely ensure you fill that void with required productivity.
Morrie teaches us that life structure is a deliberate choice, not an accident.
Let's connect the profound insights of Tuesdays with Morrie to the broader themes that we explore here on Crisis and Perception.
The book is just a perfect illustration of the concept of the power of intentional design.
How so?
Well, the capitalist materialist success script is extremely robust. I mean, it's the default operating system for millions of people. But the book demonstrates that a highly intentional counter system, one as small as a private class between two individuals, can effectively override that powerful default setting.
The design is what matters.
Yes. It wasn't just a spontaneous chat. It was a scheduled, protected Tuesday. This reinforces our core theme that structural change, whether it's societal or personal, begins by identifying the existing systemic scripts, the unwritten rules, and then designing viable, protected, and intentional alternatives.
You have to be as rigorous about scheduling your well-being as your boss is about scheduling your output.
Exactly. Next, the concept of power hidden inside neutral processes is illuminated brilliantly.
On the surface, who would argue against making a good living or being productive or setting goals? They seem like neutral, objective ideas.
But the book unveils that this perceived neutrality wields immense silent power. It dictates our emotional and moral priorities.
So the seemingly innocent process of calendar management and corporate metrics becomes a mechanism of moral control.
It subtly dictates which activities work. Performance, quantifiable output are inherently good and responsible, and which reflection, rest, non-monetized connection are lazy, self-indulgent, or bad.
The protagonist spent years being emotionally unavailable, prioritizing the measurable over the essential, all under the guise of being responsible and successful.
The book exposes the power structure embedded in the mundane act of checking a corporate calendar.
And finally, we see this stark contrast in moral narratives embedded in institutions.
Yes, financial markets, corporate media, the education system, they all embed a specific moral vision. It's one of scarcity, competition, and speed.
Life is presented as a race.
A race where resources are limited and you must constantly output just to survive and thrive.
But Morrie's philosophy, which comes from the lessons of love and community and acceptance, consciously rejects that institutional morality.
He offers a moral vision of emotional abundance, of cooperation and presence. The protagonist's entire journey is the complex, painful, but ultimately essential act of shedding the institutional moral vision in favor of the human one.
The system sells scarcity. Morrie teaches abundance of spirit.
So to conclude this deep dive, let's reflect on what Tuesdays with Morrie helps us see differently about the often invisible systems that structure our lives.
It fundamentally highlights that the systems we adhere to regarding work, money, and status, they're not just neutral frameworks. They're ultimately mechanisms of control over our most precious resources.
Our time and our emotional availability.
They extract a very high non-financial price in missed moments, deferred happiness, and just emotional depletion.
The true deep dive, the one Morrie forces on his student, is always inward. But the book stresses that this essential exploration requires dedicated, protected time. Time that the default societal system is aggressively designed to consume.
And why does this system's perspective matter so much today? I think it's because understanding the structural pressure to hurry, to accumulate, to distract, that's the first step toward reclaiming your agency.
Absolutely. If you internalize the frantic pace of life as purely your own personal fault, you just feel crushing guilt and shame.
But if you understand it as a conditioned response to powerful structural incentives, you gain the power to structurally change your own life. You can move from guilt to intentional design.
And this leads us to the critical, structural questions the book raises but doesn't fully answer. If Morrie's lessons on love, connection, mortality, forgiveness, if these are universally essential for a fulfilling human life, why do we not have formal institutional structures for teaching them?
What does it fundamentally say about our societal priorities that the deepest wisdom has to be sought out privately, outside the mainstream educational and professional pathways?
And often only when you're facing the irreversible reality of a personal or terminal crisis.
It suggests a profound systemic neglect of the human spirit in favor of the economic engine.
And critically, that engine doesn't stop just because we realize we're unhappy. The change has to come from the individual choice to build a firewall.
So we want to leave you with this concluding thought for reflection. If you were forced today to design your own final course on life, who would be the teacher?
And maybe more importantly, what concrete structural changes to your schedule, your physical boundaries, your relationship with technology, what changes would you need to make right now to ensure those intentional Tuesdays, those untouchable anti-productivity zones actually happen? This deep dive was based on the book Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom.
We encourage you to read the book yourselves, support the author if you found these ideas valuable, or check your local library for free access.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.